Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf tet. We are at the two dots at the bottom of Chet Amabet. And so let me share my screen and we'll get started. So yesterday, before starting, I'll note it as I have on my screen. We discussed the case of Karav Lamezid, where a murderer, it's too bad a murderer, we're talking about murder, not a good topic, but if you kill somebody on purpose and get warned, well, then you get executed. That's a capital crime. If you kill somebody and you didn't get warned and you didn't have, and there was no reason, or you were just very negligent, so you obviously wouldn't be warned in that situation as well. So then you don't get killed, and you don't go to the exile, to the city of refuge. On the other hand, if you kill somebody by accident, so then you get sent to a city of refuge. And the reason that you want to go to that city of refuge is because the family of the person that you kill has the right to kill you. And the question was, what about that middle case, the case where a person was too negligent to be able to go to the city of refuge? Would the family of the victim be entitled to kill you? And the answer to that question is yes. That in fact the Rambam says that essentially, as long as the person was negligent or worse, then the family has the right to kill the person if the court isn't going to kill the
Even in
person.
the city of refuge.
No, not in the city of.
Okay.
Oh, well, if you weren't exiled to the city of refuge
And you went,
anyway,
they could come get
they
you.
could still come get
Oh,
you.
now it's
Exactly.
clear, right.
Okay. But and we're going to deal with the beginning of that process today. Today we're going to have the Mishnah that talks about going to the city of refuge, what that's like, and the process. And part of that process is that even before you get judged, you should run to the city of refuge because that will protect you pre-judgment. And then post-judgment, if you get judged to go to the city of refuge, so then they take you back. And we're going to hear about that. But right now, we heard in our Mishnah that everyone can be exiled for killing a Yisrael, and a Yisrael can be exiled for killing them. But the Mishnah wasn't specific in terms of everyone. And we know that it's not really everyone, because a non-Jew who kills a Jew, even by accident, is actually executed. There is no city of refuge for that person. And so as a result, we know that the rule can't be talking about literally anybody. And so who is it that is included in that? Everyone. And that's where we pick up two dots, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 lines up from the bottom of Chet Amabet. So Hakol Golan Al Yedei Yisrael. So everyone can get exiled as a result of accidentally killing a Jew. So Hakol Golan Al Yedei Yisrael Al Atuye Mai. Who does that that usage of that kind of word, like all? Who does that come to include? Latuye Eved V'Kuti. So it comes to include both an Eved, a slave, who is considered effectively Jewish, or certainly Jewish enough, because now they are subject to the non-time bound, to all mitzvot except for the positive mitzvahs that are time bound, just like a woman. And so as a result, they are going to be, treated like a Jew. And a kuti is a group that believes that converted as a result of being in a bad situation. And as a result, there's a question as to whether conversion is a good one or not. And so therefore, we're going to sort of give them also, this in between status, essentially. The note here reminds us that the Kutim were a group that was brought to the land of Israel by Sancheriv. And then they converted to Judaism because they were afraid of these lions attacking them. And so as a result, the question is whether that their conversion is considered a sincere conversion. And it certainly doesn't seem like they ended up being part of the the Jewish people generally. Their actions were not consistent with those of a good Jew, and so as a result,
Kutim are the Samaritans.
Well, that's sort of the original term Kutim is from before the Samaritans, but then they're essentially aligned with the Samaritans and the who worship on I think it's Har Gerizim. So
They still do. They bring Korban Pesach there.
yeah, exactly. So there's a Jewish element to them, but in any event, they're not
Jews.
Exactly. But they're sort of like this in-between category. And so as a result, if one of them were to kill somebody who's Jewish, they would get exiled by accident if they killed somebody Jewish by accident. So Tanina lahad Tanu Rabbanan. But what's second? And in fact, we have a brisa that seems to say the same thing. Eviv akuti gola veloka al yedei Yisrael. And a slave and a kuti can go both to exile and to get lashes if they, with respect to something that they do to a Jew. Yisrael gola veloka al yedei kuti ve'eved. And similarly, vice versa, a Jew can end up exiled or receive lashes based on what they do to a kuti or a slave. So bishlama eved v'kuti gola al yedei Yisrael veloka. When it comes to the galus and lashes for a slave or a kuti to receive because of something they did to a Jew, that makes sense because gola de katle veloka de levache. That if you and I wonder whether there were probably a number of things that they could have said with respect to lashes, but it's a nice rhyme to say that they get galus for killing katle and loka, and they get lashes delache for cursing. So that it's a nice structure there. So El Yisrael gola veloka al yedei kuti. But when it comes to the other way around, a Jew would not get necessarily galus or lashes with respect to what they do to a Jew. So because bishlama gola de katle, we can understand that a Jew would get galus if he killed a kuti by accident. But but when it comes to lashes, amai delache. When it comes to cursing, we have a general rule that you're allowed to curse people who are not observing the law, because it says v'nasi v'amecha lo saor. You shouldn't curse a leader within that is among your people, and among your people means ba'osa ma'ase amcha, when they act in a proper manner. But if somebody acts in an improper manner and is doing something they shouldn't be doing, well, then they are allowed to be cursed, and you won't be subject to lashes.
No.
So Ella Amarav Acha Bar Yaakov Kigon Sheheid Bovahuzim. Maybe we can say that the Jew is getting lashes if he testified about a kuti and was an Eid Zomim, where there, in certain situations, that Eid Zomim is going to get lashes. And so maybe that's the situation where we're going to say that that a Jew will get lashes as a result of taking action against a kuti. But the kavase gabi eved, but that doesn't work, because we want to try and find an action that works both directions, that works both for a kuti or an eved to do to a Jew, to a full-fledged Jew, and for a full-fledged Jew to do to a kuti or eved. But a slave doesn't have the ability to testify. Sheheid bo v'huzam. Could they testify and become an Eid Zomim? Eved bar Eiduzu, is an Eved qualified to testify? The answer is no. So as a result, Ella Amar Rav Acha Braid de Rav Ika. So as a result, Rav Acha, the son of Rav Ika, offers a second alternative answer. Hakabamayaskin. Here's what we're talking about. Kigon Shehikahu Haka. It's where they hit each other. And so as a result, if they hit each other, and there's a caveat, because if you hit somebody and you cause real financial damage, well, then you have to pay for that financial damage. But here we're going to say she'ein ba shava pruta, where it's not the amount of damage that you do is a very small amount and is not equal to the minimal coin size. And as a result, the Amar Rabbi Ami, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, he ka she'ein ba shava pruta loka. That when this is the irony, right? Most people, if they did $10 worth of damage, would way prefer paying the $10 to getting lashes. But the point is that if you do so little damage that that there's no financial payment, you actually end up subject to lashes. So velo makshinan hakala klala, and we're not going to connect the concept of lashes to cursing, because again, remember when we said cursing, and there's a machlokas about this, but the cursing, we said, does not apply to somebody who does not act in a proper manner, whose actions are not ka'amucha, not like your people. And so as a result, you're allowed to curse such a person. One might connect cursing to hitting and say that hitting is also permitted for somebody who doesn't behave. But that is a debate. And this Gemara will say is according to the person who says that you cannot connect those two. And so therefore, hitting somebody who, even if somebody doesn't behave like a kuti, is still not a proper action and can result in the Jew getting lashes. And so we've now figured it out. The answer to the question of who is everyone? Everyone is a kuti and an eved and a slave. And when it comes to what is the action that's happening, is when you hit somebody without causing actual physical damage. In both directions, somebody will get lashes. Oh. And again, in both directions, if they did it to kill somebody by accident, they will get galus. All right, so our Mishnah indicated that a special law applies to a ger toshav. Specifically, they are not exiled for killing Yisrael, but they are for killing another ger toshav. So the Gemara notes that these two statements appear inconsistent. Okay, so the Gemara asks, "Chutz me'al yedei ger toshav," again with the exception of a ger toshav. So Alma ger toshav over kolchavim. If we see that a ger toshav who kills a Jew is not exiled, that shows that the ger toshav is really being treated like a non-Jew, and a non-Jew who kills a Jew by accident is actually executed. So Amos Seifa, 1 second though, what about the end of our Mishnah? Because there it says ger toshav gola al yedei ger toshav. A ger toshav does get exiled if they kill a ger toshav. So ger toshav being exiled is something that seems to only apply to Jews. So doesn't that show an inconsistency? So no, of course not. Amar of Kahana lo kashya kan beger toshav shahara ger toshav. In the end of our Mishnah, it was with a ger toshav who kills a ger toshav by accident, and so that's why he's going to get exiled. Kan beger toshav shahara Yisrael. But if he kills a full-fledged Jew, well, then he's not going to get exiled because that's not a sufficient penalty. As Rashi tells us in the 7th or 8th line, in the narrow lines on the top of Tet Amud Aleph, Lo kasha hulu ger toshav shahara ger toshav, gola, a ger toshav who kills another ger toshav is going to get exiled. Kedikatani, as we learned behedja, as we learned explicitly in our Mishnah. Viresha, but when it comes to a ger toshav not getting killed, kishahara gets a Yisrael, when not getting exiled, kishahara gets a Yisrael, when he kills a full-fledged Jew, ain't a gola. He doesn't get exiled. Delo sagile begullus, because that is not a sufficient penalty. It's not a sufficient penalty. So again, it highlights this important concept that allowing somebody to get exiled is a form of a kapara, atonement for the person, and it's a form of protection in appropriate cases. Whereas when we say that you don't get galus, and this was something again, Ken asked this question over the last 2 days, and the answer is that if you were to kill somebody karav lemezid, and not be entitled to galus, and yet also not be entitled to the death penalty, the Rambam paskins that you are allowed to kill that person, that the Goel Adam is able to kill that person. So that's again, we don't want to give this Ger Toshav who kills a Jew that benefit, and so as a result, we are going to say that he is not going to get exiled because that's not enough. So Ika Darami Karai Ahadadi. So there was this discussion that we just had. Some people say that it was based on trying to contrast two psukim. Because Ksiv, Livnei Yisrael v'la toshav b'tocham tiyena sheish arim, that we have one pasuk that says that there are 6 cities that we're supposed to set aside as cities of refuge, and that's the pasuk in Perak Lamed Hey of Bamidbar, pasuk Tesvav, and it references specifically Toshav, which is a general reference to Ger Toshav. Uksiv v'hayu lachem he'arim l'miklat, and yet 3 psukim earlier it says that the cities of refuge are for you. Lachem, implying for you, v'lo l'gerim, and not for people who are not Jewish or strangers in the land. Now here, gerim could mean converts, but it's almost certainly not intended to mean converts. It means people who have not converted but are resident, a ger toshav, as opposed to a ger tzedek. So Amar of Kahana lo kasha kan beger toshav shahara Yisrael kan beger toshav shahara ger toshav. So again, the point is that when a ger toshav kills a Jew, well, then the cities of refuge are not for them. It's only for the Jews. And when a ger toshav kills a ger toshav, that's when the city of refuge is a city of refuge for even people who are a toshav, even for a ger toshav. Okay, so again, same basic concept and same answer that Rav Kahana just gave. So Uraminhu. So now I'm going to ask you an inconsistency. So because our Mishnah ended up saying that a ger toshav is different from a non-Jew, because a ger toshav is going to get galus for killing a ger toshav, whereas a non-Jew would not get galus. If a non-Jew just happens to be in the land and kills somebody and is not a resident, he is going to be subject even to the death penalty, because lefika gerva ovid kochavim shahargu neheragin. So the brisa that we're quoting says that a ger and a non-Jew are both executed. Katani ger dumya de ove kochavim ma ovid kochavim loshna de katal bar minei loshna de katal delav bar minei nerag. That when it comes to that, this is teaching us, this brisa is telling us that a ger toshav, even though we were using the term ger, which is very confusing because ger often means convert, but in this context it does not. It's referring to a ger toshav, somebody who lives in Israel, has not converted, but is observing essentially the 7 laws of Noach and paying all their taxes, etc. And so as a result, they're a full-fledged resident. And we in Judaism, we give those people essentially almost full rights, as being as if they were a full resident and a full citizen. And so by this brisa connecting a ger toshav with somebody who's not Jewish, it's telling us that just as somebody who's not Jewish, it doesn't make a difference whether they kill somebody, who they kill, whether they kill a Jew or a non-Jew. Neherag, they're going to be executed, and it doesn't make a difference whether they kill the person intentionally or unintentionally. So let me just finish the line, and then we'll get to you. Av ger lo shnag de katal bar minei. And so too, when it comes to a ger toshav, it would seem that doesn't make a difference whether he kills a ger toshav, lo shnag de katal lav bar minei, or it doesn't make a difference if he doesn't kill one of his a ger toshav, he kills a Jew. Neherag. It seems that he should be, the same law applies to both of them. So that's completely inconsistent with our Mishnah. Now you have a question.
Yes. How would this all stack up? The Romans were in charge at the time, I believe,
Well,
when
at
we're
the time
speaking-
that
Yeah.
at the time of the Gemara. So
But
so
so you're killing a Jew, a Jew is gonna kill a non-Jew in a Roman territory? How would that work?
so you're excellent, excellent question. By the time the Romans were in charge,
Right,
the courts had stopped engaging in execution. So this is on some way, in some ways, saying back in the early times of the Mishnah, in
gotcha.
the
Now-
late BC, in the late years just before the Common Era, that's when we're talking
Now
about.
I understand.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
All right. Yeah, it's a long time ago. So let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi helps us make clear here. First of all, if we take a look at the wording of Rashi, it's basically the middle Rashi in the narrow lines. It says, Af ger toshav. Even though our Gemara did not have the word toshav there, Rashi inserts the word to tell us that we're not talking about a ger tzedek, we're talking about a ger toshav. Av ger toshav lo shna katel bar minei. It doesn't make a difference if he killed the same kind, meaning ger toshav kamoso, that he killed another ger toshav. Or delab bar minei, it means a Yisrael. So again, clarifying exactly what it says. So that's the question. So how come our Mishnah says that we don't treat a ger toshav like a non-Jew, but this brisa says we do treat a ger toshav just like a non-Jew? So Rav Chisda offers the first answer, which we will reject. Amar Rav Chisda lo kasha kan shahargo derech yerida kan shahargo derech aliyah. So when is it that you kill that a person goes to exile? We've learned already that anytime you're engaging in a downward motion, you're lowering a barrel, you're going down the ladder, and anytime you're going in a downward motion and then something falls or you trip and you fall down and you land on somebody and you kill them, or the barrel slips out of your hand and lands on somebody and they kill them. In all of those situations, because you're going down, you're getting exile. And that's what our Mishnah is talking about. And kan shahara go derech aliyah. Whereas we already know that when you start lifting a barrel, and you're not going to get exiled. We already saw that. So what Rav Chisda, is saying is not only is the ger toshav is not going to get exiled, but instead he will get killed. Derech Yerida de Yisrael Gali, so Ihu Nami Sagile Begalos. So when a Jew sends something downwards, he ends up going to Galus if he kills somebody by accident. So too, this ger toshav, if he sends something down, he's going to get sent and kills a ger toshav, he will also go to exile. But derech aliyah de Yisrael, but if he goes up, when it comes to a Jew, patur, he's exempt. Who, the ger toshav, if he's pulling up, he'll get killed. Now, that seems kind of crazy because when you are pulling up, you are less liable. So the fact that you would be less liable and yet now we're going to kill the ger toshav, that seems extreme. And so that's what Rava objects to. So Amarle Rava, V'lav kal v'chomer, you have a kal v'chomer that seems to go in the opposite direction. Uma derech yerida de Yisrael gali. When it comes to a Jew, he gets exiled if it's going down, and ihi hu nami sagi begalos, and we say that it's sufficient for a ger toshav to also get exiled. Derech aliyah de Yisrael pater. When it comes to going up, the Jew is completely exempt. And when you're completely exempt, by the way, then in that situation, the Goel Hadam does not have any right to kill you. The family of the victim does not, because you were completely exempt. So it's important whether, there can be two kinds of no gullus. There can be no gullus where you're completely exempt, and as a result, you're safe from the Goel Adam. And there can be a no exile because you're too guilty, but you're just not guilty enough to get killed, and then the Goel Adam can chase after you. Okay. So derech aliyah de Yisrael pater iu nerag. You're going to tell me that now when the person is pulling up, and the Jew is completely exempt and is not subject to exile and is not subject to any kind of penalty, we're now going to kill the ger toshav? That makes no sense. Ella amarava ba'omer mutter. We're dealing with a situation where the person says that they thought that it was permitted. They thought they were allowed to kill somebody. And Rashi says, ba'omer mutter nerag delav bar galasu. He's killed, the Ger Toshav is going to be killed because he's not subject to Gullus. It's too bad. It's too terrible an action that he's taken. And so as a result, we're going to say that he does not get Gullus, but instead is killed just like a non-Jew. So the point is there is an element to which a Ger Toshav is treated like a non-Jew. And that being that if he thinks that something is so permitted, that killing is permitted, but it's really like ridiculous. Why would you think that killing is permitted? So then in that situation, he will be killed just like a non-Jew rather than, and he's not treated like a Jew. A Jew who would say Omer Mutter would not get executed and would not go to Gullus, but he would still be allowed to live. The Goel Adam would be allowed to try and kill him, but he wouldn't still be allowed to live. So Amar le Abaye asks a question I don't understand. Omer Mutter Anasu. If he actually thought that it was truly permitted, well, then he should be totally exempt. Right. He shouldn't even be subject to the threat of a Goel Adam because he thought it was totally permitted. So Amar le Sha'ani Omer Omer Mutter Karav Lamezidhu. Because responding to Abaye, Rava says, I believe that if you say Omer Mutter, then it's as if it's Karav Lamezid. It's like almost like being deliberate. And while you're not going to get executed, we are going to say that you're not also going to get Gullus. It's an in-between case where we're going to allow the Goel Adam to kill you. So v'azdu l'taimayu, and this statement that Rava said that Omer Mutter is Karav Lamezid is consistent with the following debate. De itmar kisavar behema v'nimtza adam. If you think that you're killing an animal because you're looking through the bushes and you think you're killing an animal, v'nimtza adam, and it turns out that thing that you thought you were trying to kill turns out to be a person. Or Kanani v'nimtza ger toshav, or you thought you were killing a non-Jew and you ended up killing a ger toshav. Rava Amar chayiv. Rava says you're chayiv. You're chayiv for the death penalty, according to Rava. Omer Mutter Karav Lamezidhu, because if you say Omer Mutter, so then it is like you are. It's just close to being deliberate. And Rav Chisda Omer, Rav Chisda again, who was the bar plugta in our case and offered the first answer with which Rava disagreed, he says no, it's pater because Omer Mutter Anasu. So if you say that if you think that it's actually permitted something, so then you are completely onus. It's not your fault at all. So Kesavar Behema. Let's take a look at two Rashis: 3, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 lines up in the narrow lines of the Rashi. Actually, I think it's just one at the moment. So Kesavar Behema Harezeh Ka'omer Mutter. Right? If you think that you're killing an animal and you instead actually kill a person, that's almost identical to Ha'omer Mutter, to saying that something is permitted. Shahayalo Lilmod, because just as with a Omer Mutter about murder, that a person had responsibility to learn and to have this common sense that murder is prohibited. And so too, this person had the responsibility to do a little checking.
Sure.
A little bit of checking is your responsibility. Ubeger toshav askina, and we're talking, all of this is talking about where the person who's engaged in the action is a ger toshav. So that's why we're going to say that he's going to be killed. Not because a Jew who engaged in this action, he would not be killed. Because a Jew who engaged in this action, again, would be in the middle case. In the case of he would not be executed because he didn't get the warning, and he would not go to Gullus because he's too responsible. And in connection with Ken's question, he would be subject to the murder by being murdered by the Goel Adam because he's not entitled to the protections of the city of refuge. Okay, so now we're going to ask a question on Rav Chisda. So Rava asks, Esvei Rava Rav Chisda. Rava asks Rav Chisda. 1 second. We have a Torah pasuk that makes it seem like Hincha Meis al Ha'isha Asher Lakachta. That Hashem says to Avimelech when Avimelech takes Sarah, Abraham's wife and steals her, thinking that she's not married because he wants to marry her, and he takes her. Hashem says to Avimelech in a dream, "You should die because of the woman that you've taken." So my la bidei Adam. Doesn't this imply that in the court of man you should be killed because your action is so liable, you are so negligent that you should be killed, and therefore you're going to because you're so liable that you should be that you should have figured out that this is obviously somebody who's married, and he's not the sister, she's the wife, and yet you were saying to yourself that it's permitted, and so as a result, just as an Omer Mutter, as I Rava say that Omer Mutter is Karv Lamezid and gets executed. So when it's a ger toshav, so too this guy Avimelech deserves to be killed because he's a ger toshav who was saying Omer Mutter. No, Rav Chisda responds, "Lo bidei shemayim." No, the killing is referring to killing by the hands of heaven. And dekanami diksiv mechato li, because Hashem in the conversation says that Hashem has prevented Avimelech from sinning against me, implying that it was only God would be able to enforce this law and hold him accountable. Oh, and second, Rava says back, Ula Taimech, according to your premise that Mechato Li, sinning against me, implies that only God could enforce the law. What about V'chatasi Le'Elokim? When Yosef says to Paro's wife that I have sinned to God, that I would have sinned to God if I sleep with you. Because here, Potiphar has withheld, the only thing that he is not put under my control is you, and I'm going to now sleep with you. That would be terrible. So Elokim v'lo Adam, Lola Adam, are you going to tell me that Elokim is referring to only God, and that man would not be able to enforce that violation? Of course not. Of course, if Yosef had slept with her, he would be deserving to die in the court of humanity. Eladino Masur La'Adam. Certainly, the point is that it's God's law, but it's been given over to humanity. Hakanami Dino Masur La'Adam. It is God's law that is being violated, but it's God's law that has been handed over to humanity. And so that is the basis of the machlokas between Rava and Rav Chisda. So Isvei Abaye LeRava. So now Abaye challenges Rava. Hagoy gam tzadik taharog. Again, so there was no answer. Rav Chisda offered no answer. But now Abaye tries to come to some degree to Rav Chisda's defense and challenge him from another way. Because after all, in connection with Avimelech, Avimelech says back to God, Hagoy gam tzadik taharog, you're going to kill an innocent nation, meaning referring to himself. I didn't know that she was married. I thought she was his sister. So Hasam Kidkamahadre Ileve. No, that the point is that you have to take a look at the answer. Because what did Hashem answer? You need to return the wife because he's a prophet. Now, in second, as the Gemara points out, as we turn to Tedem Abet, Eishes Navi, who did Tahadar? The Lab Navi Lo Tahadar? 1 second, you're telling me that it's only because Abraham is a prophet that he needs to return Sarah to him? If he had stolen the wife of somebody who wasn't a prophet, he would be entitled to keep her? Of course not. So why does it say specifically that Abraham was a prophet? The point is like Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, the Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. He says it in the name of Rabbi Yonatan. He says it in the name of Rabbi Yonatan. Hachi Karmarlei. This is what God was saying back to Avimelech. Vata hashev eshes haish. You need to return the wife of this man. Mikol makom. It doesn't make a difference. No matter what, you have to return. Udika amrat. And that which you said, hagoy gam tadik ta'aro, that hello, who amarli achozihi. And with respect to your comment that you said that you were entitled to this and you were not really a sinner because he told you that she was his sister and not his wife. Navihu. The reason that he told you that is because he's a prophet. Umim chalaman, and he learned from your inappropriate behavior. Achsanai hu shebala you have somebody come to your city. Al iske yachilo shasiya shoalenoso. You ask him about whether he needs something to eat or to drink.
Yeah.
Kulum shoalenoso ishtakazu achoskazu. You're going to ask him about the woman that he's traveling with, whether she's his sister or his wife. No, that's ridiculous. That's not appropriate behavior. Mikan sheben Noach nerag shahaya lo lilmod v'lo lamed. And so as a result, we see from here that in fact, and this is consistent throughout Rava's response, that a Ben Noach is killed for a lack of knowledge about what the law is, that they have responsibility to figure out what is their laws and what should be applying to them.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So that brings us to the next Mishnah. The next Mishnah discusses two topics. One is a blind person who kills by accident, and second is an enemy who kills somebody. And the Torah specifically says in general that the person who goes to exile is not the enemy, is not an enemy who killed. So we're going to see, is that meant to be a general rule and a rule for all cases, or is it you have to look at the details? So Hasuma.
It's a comment. It's interesting though, in the Arabic societies, and in fact that it is customary not to ask about the wife or to give something. You give it to the house, or even, and when we learned in Avram and Sisera, where the angels came to visit, they began to ask about his wife. He said she's in the ohel. So they weren't asking, right? So for him to ask, right? I guess maybe it's not even appropriate for them to ask about the wife or the woman that he's with, right? Isn't that?
And that's exactly what the Gemara is saying. 100%. Absolutely. Okay, so Asuma ain't a gola. Asuma does not get exiled. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir Omer gola. Rabbi Meir says no, he is exiled, and we're going to see the basis for that in just a moment. Hasone ain't a gola. Rabbi Yossi Omer Hasone nerag. Right, an enemy is not exiled for killing. Rather, Rabbi Yossi says that he's actually executed, even though he wasn't warned. It's as if he was already warned. So Rabbi Shimon Omer, yesh sone gola, v'yesh sone she'ena gola. Rabbi Yossi says that no, Rabbi Shimon says that actually there are two possibilities. He could get galus or he could not get galus. Zeh klal. If there's any possibility that he killed him intentionally, Eino Gola, well, then he will not be exiled. But if, in fact, it's clear that he did not kill him intentionally, Hare Zed Gola, then he would be exiled. So, so Tana Rabbanan. So the rabbis teach in a brisa, and the discussion between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda about a blind person. Below Ra'os, the phrase in connection in the pasuk Lamed Perak Lamed Hey pasuk Kav Gimel in Bamidbar, it says below Ra'os, without seeing. That's how somebody killed the person. So Prat Lasuma, that implies it excludes a blind person. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, that's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Rabbi Meir Omer, no. Below Ra'os, L'Rabos is Asuma. No, without seeing comes to include a blind person. So my time at the Rabbi Yehuda. So what's the reasoning of Rabbi Yehuda Diksiv Vasher Yavo Esrei Yehu Vayar, that the person came into the forest? That's the pasuk in Dvarim Parak Yud Tet pasuk Hey. So Afilu Suma. The implication of that is it doesn't make a difference who comes into the forest to chop wood. Even a blind person can chop wood in a forest. Yeah. So asa below Ra'os Ma'ate. And so the phrase below Ra'os that we have in Bamidbar comes to narrow the scope. And if it's narrowing the scope, it's coming to exclude a blind person. The Rebbe Meir, what's his reasoning? Below Ra'os Lamait, when it comes to below Ra'os, yes, you're right that it is an exclusionary phrase, but bivli das lamait, but also without awareness, which is in the pasuk before the pasuk of Asher Yavo Esrei Ehu V'Yar, the pasuk in Dvarim Perak Yud Tet pasuk Dalid. So havi miut achar miut. So now we have two exclusions. We have, and both of these exclusions could apply to a blind person. Ve'ein miyud achar miyud el rabos. And the reason you have two exclusions is to tell you that we should include the person. And so as a result, the double exclusion includes a blind person. Rebbe Yehuda, bivli das. What does Rebbe Yehuda do with the words bli das? So he uses the following. That comes to tell us that if you kill somebody intentionally, you will not get gullus. You will not be exiled. Okay, so that was the first part of our Mishnah. Now the Gemara turns to Rabbi Yossi's statement. Rabbi Yossi Omer Hasonin Nerag, that the killer, if somebody hates somebody and he kills somebody, even if it looks like it's by accident, he gets executed. But hello, Asrube. Well, in second, how does he get executed? Wasn't he didn't he not get a warning? Because obviously if he got a warning, then it wouldn't be an accidental killing. So Masnis and Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda. Our Mishnah is Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Yehuda, who is the Tanya, Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda Omer Chaver. When it comes to a scholar, he doesn't need a warning. Because the whole reason for a warning is to determine whether somebody killed somebody on purpose or by accident. Well, this guy hates the victim. So of course he's gonna he's doing it on purpose. We don't need a warning in that situation. He knows that it's wrong and we're going to punish him. Okay, so Rabbi Shimon Omer, Yesh Sone Gola. Rabbi Shimon says that there's one who gets exiled and one who does not. And Tanya, Ketzad Amar Rabbi Shimon, what's the situation of Rabbi Shimon? Yesh Sone Gola, v'yesh Sone She'ena Gola. There's some kind of enemies who get galus, who get exiled, and some who do not. Nifsak, if the rope just broke, Gola. Well, then of course, he didn't break the rope on purpose. You could see that he didn't cut the rope. Then you would see that it was cut. If you see that the rope just broke, so then he's going to get exiled. But Nishmat, if it slipped out of his hands, well, that's a great excuse. And so therefore, Eina Gola, he will not get gullus because we're worried that actually the slippage is going to be problematic. And so suggests that in fact, he is, that he really did it on purpose. 1 second, though, it seems like there's another statement of Rabbi Shimon that seems to be the exact opposite, because Vahatanya, Rabbi Shimon Omer La'olam Eino Gola Ad Yishamet Mechatzalo Miyado, that the only time one is exiled is if the rope slipped out of his hand. So kasha nifsak on nifsak. So we have an inconsistency with respect to breakage because our Mishnah or our first brisa says breakage is you go into galus when you're an enemy, and this brisa says breakage is so unintentional that you're completely putter. And kasha nishmat on nishmat. And we have a question with respect to slippage because the most recent brisa says slippage goes to gullus, whereas the first brisa says slippage we're going to treat as worse than gullus. It's too awful when it's the enemy who does it, so he doesn't get gullus. So the Gemara explains, and we're going to use the Hagot Habach to give us the answer because it makes a lot more sense. Rashi also changes the girsa to make it clear. Nishmat on nishmat. When it comes, this is the letter bet in the Gemara. It takes us to the Hagot Habach. So when it comes to slippage, lo kasha, there's no question. Haba ohev, haba sone. When it comes to somebody that you care about and you don't want to hurt them, well, then if it slips, we know that it was you go into exile because you didn't do it on purpose. But habisoni, but if you hate the guy, well, then we're not going to let you go to Galus because we're worried that it was not an accident. And nifsak on nifsak lo kasha. And when it comes to again, the Kosabach changes the gear. So when it comes to breakage, it's also not going to be problematic. Ha-Rebbe, ha-Rabbanan. One is according to Rebbe, and one's according to the Rabbanan. Now, what Rebbe and Rabbanan are we talking about? We're talking about all the way back to I think the beginning of the second chapter in the Mishnah, where we had the machlokes between. Oh no, it was not the first Mishnah. I think it's the second Mishnah. the debate about whether or not, yes, it's the second Mishnah. I'm back on Zion, I'm a bet, based on what is it that is the problematic action that you go into Gullus? Is the pasuk referring to when you chop wood and a splinter of the wood shoots off and kills somebody? Or are you dealing with a case where you chop wood and the head of the axe flies off? So according to Rebbe, he says that it's where you chop the wood and the wood chip goes off. But if the axe head goes off and kills somebody, you're not going to go into Gullus. So that's consistent with the brisa that says that if it broke, you would not go to Gullus, right? That the point is that's consistent with our second brisa, where we say that only if it slips do you go to Gullus. And harabanan, and when the first brisa, where it says that slippage is you do go to Gullus, that's consistent with the rabbis, because the rabbis say that if, again, and why is the axe head flying off consistent with slippage? Because in both cases, you're still holding the thing, right? In the rope breakage case, you're holding the rope because the rest of it fell. And so too, the axe handle is still in your hands,
Right.
but the head has flown off and killed somebody. So therefore, we can have these two brises, both according to Rebbe Shimon, and they're still consistent because one is according to Rebbe and one is according to the rabbis. One is dealing with a friend and one is dealing with an enemy. Okay, so Lahechan Golan. So we'll conclude with this. We're learning the next Mishnah, and that will be it for today. So where do they go to Gullus? La'arei Miklat, they go to the cities of refuge. L'shalosh be'ever hayarden, 3 are in the other side of the Jordan, what is today Jordan. L'shalosh be'eretz Canaan, and 3 are in the land of Israel. Shnamar, eshlosh ha'arim titnu me'ever hayarden, ve'eshlosh ha'arim titnu be'eretz Canaan. That it says in Bamidbar Perek Lamed Hey, Pasuk Yudalid, that you set up 3 cities on the eastern side of the Jordan and 3 cities on the western side of the Jordan. Until the 3 were chosen in the land of Israel, Lo hayu shalosh shebe'ever hayarden koltos. The 3 that were on the other side of the Jordan had no effect. Shenamar sheish arei miklatiena, because the Torah says in Pasuk Yud Gimel in Perek Lamed Hey that of Bamidbar, that the 6 cities shall be a city of refuge for you. So it implies that all 6 achiyu sheshtan koltos ke'akat, until they are all working for you at the same time, that's when they would start to work. Now, that is why this learning is why we also learn from the fact that Moshe chose to set up those cities, even though they weren't going to work. That the fact is that even when you aren't going to be able to complete a mitzvah, if you can begin a mitzvah, it's worthwhile doing. And even if it doesn't take effect immediately, even if what you do will never have it take effect, it's still, when you have the opportunity to do something that Hashem has commanded, we should take advantage of that opportunity, even if we're not going to be able to finish the job. As we say in Pirkei Avos, lo alecha hamalacha ligmor. It's not on you to finish the job. You just but you can't exempt yourself from trying. So umufchuvanos lehen drachim mizolazo, and we set out roads from each of these cities to one another. Shenemar tachin lecha haderech v'shilashta, that you should prepare your self, ways for yourself and divide it into 3. And this is from Bamidbar Perek Yutet Pasuk Gimel. So umosrin lehen shnei talmidei chacham, and the court would provide to the person who's going into exile 2 Torah scholars to take the person to the city of refuge after he has been found guilty of killing accidentally and been sent to the city of refuge. Why? Shemayar genu b'derech, because we're worried that the avenger, the Goel Adam, will try to kill him on the way. V'yidabru elav. So the point is that we want the Torah scholars, this is not about defense. This is not, but rather because they don't have the right to defend the guy if the killer wants to try and kill him. But they have the ability to speak to him. And what would they say? So Rashi helps us out here. V'yadabru elav. The Rashi, the 3 lines from the bottom of the narrow lines in Rashi on the left-hand side towards the bottom of Tet Amud Bet. V'yadabru elav el goel adam. They would speak to the avenger. V'omrin lo, and they would say to him, Al tinaheg bo min hakshovchei damim. Don't act towards him like a murderer. Bishgaga bamasat liyado. Everything that happened by accident. He didn't try to kill your relative, so you should let him go. Let him go to the city of refuge. So again, it highlights that maybe more countries need to recognize both the desire for revenge and the fact that even an accidental killing has tremendous impact, and that we essentially allow Goel Adam in that situation emphasizes that possibility. So Rameir Omer Hu Medaber Al Yidei Atzmo. Rameir says that he also can speak for himself. Shene'amar Zed Dvar Harotzeach. Now, Zed Dvar Harotzeach really means this is the matter, this is the dealings, this is how we talk about a killer. But the point is that because the word Dvar also could mean word, so what we're saying is he's reading into that pasuk and saying, Zed Dvar Harotzeach, that this is a situation where the killer should speak for himself. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says, "B'tchila echad shogig ve'echad mezid makdimin la'arei miklat." Originally, whether you were before any court case, if you killed somebody, whether it was accidental or intentional, you ran as fast as you could to the city of refuge because that would protect you from the family. At least the simple understanding is that would protect you from the family trying to take revenge. And then the court would bring the person to the court. Mishin is chayav misa bebeisdin haraguhu, and if he was chayav misa, the beisdin would kill him. The shalom is chayav misa prataruhu, and if he wasn't chayav, he would be exempt. And Mishachin is chayav galut, and if he was exempt, then the question is would he be subject to galut? And if he was, magazirin otolim komo, they would return him back to the city of refuge, and that would be where the 2 scholars would travel with him. Shene'amar veheshivo oso haida el ir miklato. And how do I know he was originally in the ir miklat? Because it says that if in fact he is found to have killed accidentally, that the court will return him to his city of refuge. So the Gemara picks up with a brisa that details the location of the cities of refuge. But for that discussion, please stay tuned for tomorrow's daf.
If the Beit Din goes to, if he runs there immediately, and the Beit Din sends messengers to bring him to court to decide what his fate would be, who is protecting him from the Goel Dam on the derech from the Ir Miklat before the trial?
So before the trial, because he has not been found guilty of anything, and technically it's possible that it was an one situation, the Goel Hadam would potentially be subject to Misa, would be subject to the death penalty. And so as a result, the thing that will protect him is that when the court brings him back, if the Goel Adam comes, the people who are the messengers of the court will say, listen, if you kill this guy, you could be subject to the death penalty because he has not been found guilty of anything. And indeed, even if it turns out that he would have been found guilty, you could argue that he would still be subject to the death penalty because we have seen that until somebody is actually found guilty, they're considered a live person, and murdering them is considered murder. So as a result, that's the thing that will protect him. But the point is that the reason that I think that he needs to run originally is because at that moment, the emotions are the highest. And people, it's that's the moment when people are most likely to engage in that bad behavior. And so that's why he needs to run there and get there as fast as possible. But when he's coming back, at least he's with somebody who can say to the people, listen, if you do this, you're going to be subject to murder. He can't be obligated to go and find people to come with him to go to the Ir Miklat, that's too risky. But when he's on his way back from the Ir Miklat to the court, so then at least the court can tell the person, listen, if you kill the guy, you're going to be subject to Misa. And obviously they would be able to be witnesses as well. And so that's further support for the idea that they would potentially the Goel Adam would end up being killed.
Okay, now how do we determine, we talked earlier about a difference between Ohev and Soneh. How do we know what's in the mind of the person, whether he actually hates someone or likes the person?
So clearly, the answer to your question obviously is that we need to have some kind of additional information to answer that. You're absolutely right. And so it seems like we would need evidence that in fact the people, there was some kind of feud between them, and that in fact they hated, and maybe you need to have the guy say that I hated the person. We have not answered that question as to sort of what the evidence is. It'll be interesting to see whether any of that comes out over the coming days. But if not, it seems like you would need to have some kind of testimony of somebody saying, listen, I hate this person, or something along those lines. But you got the answer to the question that you asked. Again, was a great question. The Rambam says that in fact, a Karav Lamezid case, the Goel Adam has the right to kill a person, and the city of refuge provides no protection for a Karav Lamezid killer.
So on that point, the Karav Lamezid. So I'm thinking about Cain. So Kodesh Baruch Hu says you're going to wander and so forth, but he's ultimately killed by Tubal Cain or Lemech, I think it's a Lemech. So this person, he's always looking over his shoulder. Where's he going to hide? Because the Goel Adam, in this case, Karav Lamezid, can always have that possibility. Can always kill him. He can always seek him. He's got nowhere. Where's he going? I mean, he's going to go to another country across the sea. I mean, they could send hitmen after him, and so the Goel Adam.
Well, I don't know. We haven't learned all the details of the Goel Adam yet, so let's be patient on that. But it's not clear that the Goel Adam would have the right to hire a hitman. It may be that the Goel Adam has to do it himself.
So he himself, all right, but even
but you're absolutely right. That's exactly the point. The Rambam specifically notes that essentially the person has to do everything that he can to appease the people. So you're absolutely right that's exactly the case.
Well, the Goel Adam doesn't necessarily mean one person, does it? This person could have 8 brothers. I mean, right? So each one of them,
correct, absolutely,
is the Goel Adam,
right? The Rambam's language is the following: Umaya says, "Yashev v'yishmor atzmo mi Goel Adam." What is he going to do? He's got to watch out for himself from the Goel Adam, and that this law applies not only to somebody who is a Karav Lamezid case, but also v'chein kol haratzchanim shehargu be'ed echad, if they only had one witness or without hasra. In all those situations, the Goel Adam would have the right to kill the person. This is Rambam Hilchos Rotzeyach, Perek Vav, Halachot Daled and Hey. So definitely, you're absolutely right. That's exactly the point. If you, in some ways, it's a tough penalty because you're going to always have to look over your shoulder 100%. And maybe that's part of the point. You got to be, Karav Lamezid is really a bad thing. It's really bad. So we want to punish the person. All right. Have a wonderful day. Look forward to continuing our learning tomorrow. Be well. Good moed. Moedim l'simcha.